So today, I want to talk about public school and why you shouldn't send your kids there. Obviously, I know a lot of homesteaders and people who are out doing what I'm doing say a lot of the same things. Mine's going to be for different reasons, because I'm not going to explain to you that the Rockefellers designed the education system so that we could work in the factories, or that technically the education system is built for the female mind, not for the male mind, that needs more stuff. I want to walk through the value of actual learning. So I went up to visit my mom. It was over the holidays, and she had found some papers while she was cleaning out her storage room. She's like, "Jared, look, this is showing what you tested at versus the national average." And it's hilarious because it's like math concepts, I got 100. National average was 79. Numerations, I got 100. National average was 75. Numbers, I got 100. National average was 87. Integers, I got 100. National average was 78. Fractions, I got 100. National average was 82, etc., and so forth. Basically, in all of math, I think my worst score was like a 94. It was kind of funny because watching her talk with so much pride, I couldn't help but realize schooling had nothing to do with it. In fact, on this particular test, it was funny because I was accused of cheating. This was the 6th grade placement test going into 7th grade. And because I scored so high and my grades were so low, they called me in and said that I cheated and that I had to retake the test, and that this time the teacher was going to be sitting next to me because I pretty much graduated 6th grade with like 61%. I mean, technically, had my parents wanted to hold me back because I was so young in my age group, they probably could have. So my teachers did not believe I was there, technically the smartest student in math. They had me retake the test, and I scored 1 point higher. And it got me thinking about education in general, because going to public school for me, and for so many people, was the absolute worst thing I could have done for my health. It was the worst thing I could have done for my sanity, my self-esteem, any of those type of things. Had I just been working on a farm, getting things done, it would have been so much better. And half the reason I'm building my farm is so that my grandkids have that opportunity. And they don't have to just define themselves by social media or define themselves by what kids are saying at school or any of that. By my senior year, I'd pretty much dropped out of high school and I was just working. I had a 1.8 GPA, and I could have cared less about high school. I didn't believe it was going to benefit me in any way, shape, or form in my life, which it didn't. And I figured, what is the point of being here? Particularly when I was already scoring higher than everyone else was on their different tests. I was like, what's the point of being here? This is dumb. I technically went to take my GED, and I took it. I didn't go to a prep class or any of that. And the teacher was like, or the lady, the administrator of the test, whatever we'd want to call her, she looked at my results and she's like, "I've never seen somebody score this high. Nobody like you should get your GED. You can CLEP out of classes and get your diploma." And I'm like, oh, I can just test out of these? So I went into South Point High, an adult education school. I took their placement test. I tested in almost every category as an above a college graduate. And they gave me most of my credits I needed to graduate. And then I did a couple of packets, which took me, 24 hours in total. I mean, obviously it was over the course of like a week or two. And then I got my diploma. So technically I graduated top of my class with a 1.8 GPA. I was top of my class because I was the only person that graduated that day. But you look at why. So in that 6th grade test, when I placed as high as I did, I was accused of cheating. My teachers didn't assume that somebody who didn't follow their protocols could be intelligent. And so I had to retake the test. About a month later, my parents told me they were getting divorced. 7th grade started. It was a new school. Didn't like it. Didn't necessarily care about my grades. I just graduated elementary by the skin on my teeth. Junior high probably wasn't going to be much better. And it was funny because I was put in advanced math and I was doing the work and I would write the answers down. I was getting everything correct. I wasn't cheating, even though you could because the answers were in the back of the book. And yet, my teacher called me out one day, said I was cheating, I wouldn't show my work, and that I still expected full credit. So, me being the nonconformist that I am, I told the teacher, okay, write a problem on the board, I'll figure it out. So the teacher wrote a problem on the board, I figured it out. She had to go through and run the actual calculations to determine that I was correct. And then she was shocked because I hadn't had to show my work or do any of it. I basically had a dry erase board in my head, and that's how I could do all of my math problems. So she writes up another one, I get it right. She writes up another one, I get it right. Then she throws a tantrum and explains to me that she has a master's in mathematics and there is no way I can do these problems in my head when she can't. Which, when you think about that, is rather hilarious. Because she had a master's in mathematics, which honestly means nothing. Doesn't actually mean you're good at math. I don't know how many people I've met with a master's in business administration that couldn't run a company if their life depended on it. Or a master's in this, that, or the other, and they were not remotely good in their field. But she was pissed that a 12-year-old kid was better at math than she was. So needless to say, I got sent to the principal's office for causing a commotion. The commotion was I could answer problems without having to show my work. And most of junior high was like that. When you look at, like, I was in creative writing. Writing was the one emotional outlet that I had during my parents' divorce. And I would commonly bury my soul into my writing. But my creative writing teacher would always dock me and give me a D, give me an F, even on the assignments that we had to read publicly to the class, where everyone in the class told me that mine was the best. My teacher would look at me and say, hey, here's the problem. You didn't follow the exact outline that I gave you. And I'd look at her and I'm like, well, I guess that's my fault because I thought this was creative writing, not follow the instructions to a T writing and do exactly what the teacher tells you. But that's what she thought the class was. I completed her class with like a D-. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all teachers suck, just the majority. But at the same time, I did have a teacher like Mr. Brinton at Churchill. Mr. Brinton was amazing. He had iguanas in his classroom. He taught biology. He was the first person from a teaching perspective to truly inspire me to go home and learn. And that's what he did. Now, back in those days, we couldn't just Google, we couldn't ask AI. So I had to go to the library, check out a bunch of books, and I was just going through and loving every minute of what I was learning. And so I studied and I studied and I studied. And it was amazing because when you look at it from that perspective, I learned more in 7th grade biology because he inspired us to go learn on our own than I did from any other teacher throughout junior high and high school, because they didn't ever inspire me. So I just continued to learn on my own in spite of them, not because of them. My wife was homeschooled. Her dad had his own company. You know, he was working all the time, doing all of that. She comes from a family of 11 kids. So in those days, it wasn't really possible for her mom to homeschool as well as she could have. I respect her mom tremendously for being willing to homeschool and knowing that that was the best thing for her kids, but didn't have the resources and everything else that you do today in order to be able to homeschool your kids with having 11 kids. Because let's face it, that's a crap load of kids. And so my wife had a few words she couldn't say correctly because her family actually has their own accent that is the Hollabaugh accent because it's how they grew up. So my wife and I decided to put our kids in public school, but in the dual immersion class. And we did it because we wanted them to be fluent in Spanish. And it seemed like the right decision at the time. And it's interesting because both of my kids, ludicrously smart. If you look at my daughter, she always did well in school. I mean, even in college right now, there's classes where she has above 100%, which honestly shouldn't even be possible in college. If you're giving out extra credit in college, that's kind of silly, but they do. And she has over 100% in several of her classes. She's a classically trained pianist. There's basically nothing she can't do. She's super smart, speaks a couple of languages, and knows multiple different musical instruments between her viola, her ukulele, her piano. Like, she is exceptionally talented. And then you look at my son was much more like me. He did not do well in school. Even in his senior year, they kicked him out. They said, you're too far away from graduation. We aren't going to allow you to stay in school because you can't walk. And even his counselor said that with how far behind he wasn't going to be able to walk with his friends. He wasn't going to graduate with his class. Then he went to the school where you can clip out of things, and he took all the tests, and he earned, I think it was 1.5 years of high school credits in 2 or 3 weeks. He has since joined the Air National Guard. He was an honor grad from basic training. He graduated his technical training at top of his class. He is a very, very, very smart kid. I would argue that both of my kids are in the top few percentile of the country in intelligence, despite the fact we sent them to public school. And yet, I can see how public school hurt both of them. Because it hurt my son in the same way that it hurt me, in that he was punished for not learning the way the school wants you to learn. I never learned the way they wanted me to learn. I played games like Math Quest and different things like that taught me more about math so that I could open the next door than any math class I ever sat in. I learned more from playing different strategy games and everything else than I ever did from going to school. I mean, heck, a lot of the principles I learned in those games are what I apply to business, to run companies effectively and efficiently, to make sure that we can take care of our customers and still operate at a profit and make everything work the way that it should. And so he was punished because he wasn't the type of kid who wanted to go home and do 2 hours of homework on something he already knew that he had technically learned in the first few minutes of the explanation, and he didn't need to do a bunch of repetitive work to understand it. And then when you look at my daughter, she was punished because she wasn't allowed the creative outlets that she should have been allowed. When you listen to her play the piano or look at her art or understand just how magically artistic that girl is, she shouldn't have had to sit in 5 or 6 other classes that were teaching her stuff that, again, she already knew. And then she got homework in those classes to go through and do busy work to prove that she already knew things that she knew. And instead, she should have been allowed to play the piano more. I mean, granted, she practiced at least an hour a day on average. She should have been allowed to paint more, to create more, to do more of those type of things. And yet she wasn't. And that did play a toll on her emotional and mental health, because when you're so exceptional at something, and yet high school, particularly in the time she was in school, because, you know, her entire high school was basically COVID. So you look at it, and my biggest regret, now that my kids are 18 and 20, is that I sent them to public school. Had I homeschooled them, I think I could have taught them so much more. I mean, we would watch a movie and we would go over like General Patton and what he accomplished during World War II, why he wanted to continue the war against the Soviets, what his beliefs were, some of which were straight up crazy, like his reincarnation and everything else. But we would go over it and they would be shocked. We would go over the Civil War and what caused it, and they would be shocked. We would go over basic historical facts, and my kids made it through years and years and years of high school without ever learning them. I don't even remotely understand how that can be possible. I don't understand how we can be teaching so much stupidity that we can't find it to teach truth. And then you look at the average kid and how financially illiterate they are, and it's shocking. You look at all the things we should be teaching in high school, and none of those things are actually being taught. They're not walking out with skills to start a career. They're not walking out with the ability to run a company. Most of them aren't even walking out with the ability to understand how to run their own checking account or how to properly use a credit card. I mean, I forget who it was, but he said, you know, one of the largest dangers in the world is compounding interest. And we're not teaching our kids why and how that's going to work against them their entire lives unless they prevent that from occurring. We're not teaching them that, you know, being a consumer doesn't technically benefit society, and we need to build and work towards a better society. So my best friend is unquestionably one of the smarter individuals that there is. During his time when he was getting his bachelor's degree, he came to work for me. And he worked at a plumbing, heating, and air conditioning company, answering phones, helping out in the office, getting all of that type of stuff done. He got his bachelor's degree, and then he went to work for a bank. Fortune 100 company. Granted, they're an evil bank. He wasn't progressing overly quickly, so he decided he needed to get his MBA so that he could get, you know, above a branch manager position. So he goes back to school, he gets his MBA, and the bank, you know, still doesn't necessarily promote him, any of that type of stuff. But now he has even more schooling. So then I offer him a job coming to work for me, making more money than what he's making working for the bank. So he comes back to plumbing, heating, and air. Shortly thereafter, I think it was probably just a couple of years, I encouraged him to take a sales position. And he took a sales position this time with another company because I was leaving that particular company. And now he is again back working for me. But it's kind of intriguing because when you look at it, he spent, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to get his bachelor's degree. And yet he already had a job working for me. He spent even more tens of thousands of dollars getting his MBA. Yet had he just stayed working for me, he would have already had a six-figure income by that point. Because he is a smart enough person to excel in being a contractor and selling things and all of that type of stuff. And so it's fascinating because he went to, you know, 6 years worth of schooling, spent probably over $50,000, you know, had to pay off those debts and everything else just to come back into plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical and work for me, which is the same job he already had when he was 22 years old. His schooling didn't necessarily benefit him. And when you look at how many college graduates and everything else are even working in their field, or how many people get degrees that are entirely worthless, it does become fascinating, and you have to go, what is going on with school? Then I want to add to that, and I want to talk about the Shaws. So I love the Shaws. We're really good friends. We're building the farm together, but they have their younger kids in a kind of private online school with a religious emphasis, which again, religious emphasis is awesome. It intrigues me because I wonder what they're going to learn in the next semester. Because when you look at what we're going to be doing on the farm, during their next semester, we're going to be planting at least 100,000 plants. We're going to be transplanting even more. We're going to be, you know, planting probably 200 different varieties, learning how to grow them, learning how to do all of these type of things as we build our beds, plant them outside, up pot them. We're basically going to learn how to run a nursery in a high altitude desert with greenhouses, something that none of us have ever done. And when I look at what they're going to learn in the next semester, I wonder if any of it is as valuable as that is. When people ask me how I was running a company at 21, it's because I was running a company at 17. Instead of going to high school, I was working. I was making a living, you know, at that time we were clearing $25 an hour, and this is back in the late 90s. So it's worth, you know, 4 times, maybe 5 times as much as that is today, as a 17-year-old. And we were looking for ways to build the company, to make more money, to make things more efficient. And all that did is continue to translate into what we were doing. Because I want to go on record with this rant because one of their daughters, Lauren, she's been on a number of different videos. She is awesome. She's 17. She's in her senior year of high school. And what is she going to do once she graduates? in 5 months. I would wager she's going to work on the farm. And you can't help but go, okay, so what is she doing? What is she learning? What is she gaining from this last semester of high school that she wouldn't gain just working on the farm and being homeschooled and learning the different things that she needs to learn? You know, there's a reason like people were finishing 6th grade like my grandpa did, and he died a multimillionaire, and just going and working on the farm. There's a reason my other ancestors were doing apprenticeships when they were super young, because when you learn something, when you develop skills, those skills are far more valuable and you feel more a greater sense of self-worth than just learning to do things that your teacher's telling you that you need to do. So I'm sorry this rant ended up being incredibly long, but comment with your thoughts and opinions down below. If you disagree with me, feel free to disagree with me. If you agree, tell me why, because I know this is kind of a unique take versus some of the different thoughts that are out there on YouTube. Thanks, guys. See you in the next one.